The judge slammed her gavel and said the words that made the room stop breathing. "If you miss one more check and your daughter goes into temporary foster care tonight." Across the courtroom, Daniel Parker did not argue. He did not shout. He did not beg. He only swallowed slow and painful and nodded once, as if accepting a sentence already carved into stone. Outside, the rain was coming down hard, the kind that turns asphalt into a mirror and headlights into knives of light. Daniel stepped out of the county courthouse with his collar pulled up and his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His phone buzzed again. Another missed call from his supervisor. Another shift he could not afford to lose. He stood there for a moment, rain soaking through his jacket, watching people hurry past him without looking. He looked exactly like what they thought he was. Tired, broke, disposable. An hour later, miles away on a 2-lane road that cut through the Appalachian foothills, the rain found someone else. The black sedan swerved tires, screaming before coming to a hard stop on the shoulder. Steam hissed from beneath the hood. Inside the car, Laura Whitmore sat, frozen hands still gripping the wheel. Heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain. Her breath came short and sharp. The dashboard lights flickered, then went dark. No signal bars on her phone. Nothing but trees, rain, and the low growl of thunder rolling through the hills. She stepped out, heels sinking into mud rain, plastering her hair to her face. The road was empty in both directions. She popped the hood and stared at the mess inside as if staring harder might fix it. Her jaw tightened. All her life problems had bowed to preparation, to authority, to knowing the rules. This one did not care who she was. She tried the trunk. The latch stuck. She cursed under her breath, a sharp sound lost to the storm. For the first time that day, her composure cracked. Not in the courtroom. Not when a room full of strangers watched her weigh someone's future. Here, alone. Headlights appeared in her peripheral vision. A battered pickup slowed, wipers fighting the rain. The truck pulled in behind her. The engine idled, uneven but stubborn. Daniel climbed out, boots splashing into puddles. He took in the scene with a quick, practiced glance. The stalled car, the open hood. The woman standing, stiff shoulders squared like she expected to be challenged. "You okay, ma'am?" he called, keeping his distance. His voice was calm, not curious, not pitying. Laura hesitated. She had spent decades reading people, measuring intent in the smallest movements. This man stood with his hands visible, palms open, rain dripping from his sleeves. No hurry. No pressure. Just an offer. "My car died," she said. Her voice sounded thinner than she liked. "I think it's the radiator." Daniel nodded once. "Mind if I take a look?" He leaned under the hood, rain running down his neck, fingers moving with quiet certainty. He did not touch anything. He did not need to. He did not explain unless she asked. When he spoke, it was practical. Hose cracked. Coolant gone. The engine overheated fast. "I can rig something to get you a few miles," he said. "There's a gas station down the road. Not much, but it's lighted." She watched him work, the way his brow furrowed, the way he wiped his hands on a rag he carried in his back pocket. This was not a man pretending to know what he was doing. "Why are you out here in this weather?" she asked. He shrugged. "Long day." She almost laughed. Instead, she nodded. Me too. The fix was temporary. He said so plainly. When he finished, he stepped back, rain-soaked, breathing a little heavier. He did not ask her name. He did not ask for money. He only pointed down the road. Go slow, he said. If the gauge spikes, pull over. I'll follow you till you get there. They drove in a thin convoy of light through the rain. At the gas station, Daniel waited until she parked under the flickering awning. Only then did he turn back to his truck. Thank you, Laura said. She meant it more than she expected. He nodded. Drive safe. She watched him disappear into the rain, a tail light blinking once, before the dark swallowed it. Daniel did not know that the woman he had just helped carried a courthouse key in her purse, and a reputation that made grown attorneys choose their words carefully. He did not know that her signature could freeze bank accounts, remove children from homes, or end careers. He only knew that someone needed help on a bad road, and he had the tools to give it. Back in her car, Laura sat for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, heart still racing. Her reflection stared back at her in the windshield, older than she felt, harder than she wanted to be. The rain softened to a steady whisper. She thought of the man in her courtroom earlier that day. The one who stood there without excuses, absorbing every word like a blow. The one whose file described him in neat bullet points. Inconsistent employment, late rent notices, school meetings missed due to night shifts. A risk. She shook her head as if to clear it. Coincidence, she told herself. Nothing more. Daniel drove home on roads he knew by heart, rain-slick and unforgiving. His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. I'm on my way, he said into the wind. I'll be there. At his small house, a porch light burned. Inside, his daughter waited homework, spread across the table. Eyes flicking to the door with every sound outside. When he stepped in dripping rain onto the mat, she looked up and smiled anyway. You're late, she said. I know, he replied, forcing a smile. I had to help someone. That night, Laura lay awake in a quiet house, the storm finally spent. Her mind replayed the day in fragments, a gavel striking wood, a man's silent nod, grease-stained hands steady in the rain. Somewhere between those images, something uneasy began to take shape. Neither of them knew it yet, but the road had already bound them together. And the next time they met, the imbalance of power would not be where either of them expected. Morning came without mercy. Grey light pressed through the thin curtains of Daniel Parker's kitchen, turning the room flat and colourless. The coffee maker clicked, hissed, then went silent. He stood at the counter longer than necessary, hands braced on the edge, staring at nothing, while the weight of yesterday settled deeper into his chest. Emily sat at the table, hoodie pulled over her head, pencil tapping against a worksheet. She pretended not to watch him, but her eyes lifted every time he shifted his weight. Kids always knew when something was wrong. They felt it before adults admitted it. You got caught again today? She asked, too casual. Daniel nodded. Just a follow-up. That was the lie they both agreed to live with. Follow-up sounded smaller than review hearing, smaller than consequences, smaller than the word foster. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and took a sip he barely tasted. His phone buzzed on the counter, a message from his supervisor. If you can't make the early shift again, don't bother coming in tomorrow." Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose and set the mug down before his hand started to shake. "I'll pick you up after school," he said. Emily looked up now. "You said that last time." "I know." He forced a smile. "I'll be there." She studied him for a second, then nodded, choosing to believe him, because the alternative was too heavy for a 16-year-old to carry before 8 in the morning. Across town, Laura Whitmore stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tying her hair back with practiced precision. The woman staring back at her looked composed, controlled, unyielding. The woman inside felt none of those things. She adjusted the collar of her coat and paused, fingers resting at her throat. The image of rain streaking across a windshield flickered through her mind. A man's hands, steady and unhurried. She pushed the thought aside and picked up her briefcase. By the time she reached the courthouse, the building was already awake. Fluorescent lights hummed. Shoes echoed against tile. Clerks shuffled files with the quiet urgency of people who knew delays had consequences. Laura nodded to a few familiar faces, her expression neutral, professional. No one here saw the woman stranded on a roadside the night before. They saw the judge. They always did. Daniel arrived early and sat on a hard bench outside the courtroom, his hands clasped between his knees. He wore the same jacket as yesterday, brushed as clean as he could get it. The social worker sat across from him, eyes scanning her tablet lips pressed thin. She did not look unkind. She did not look forgiving either. "Remember," she said without looking up, "the court needs to see consistency. Plans. Proof." Daniel nodded. He had plans. He had always had plans. What he lacked was time. When the courtroom doors opened, the room filled slowly. Laura took her seat at the bench and began moving through the docket. Her voice even measured every ruling precise. Daniel watched her hands as she spoke. Long fingers, a small scar near the knuckle. He felt a strange pull of recognition and dismissed it as nerves. Then she looked up and met his eyes. The moment stretched thin and taut. Laura's breath caught before she could stop it. The room seemed to tilt just slightly. The rain, the road, the man who had followed her through the storm without asking her name. The recognition did not crash over her. It crept in, piece by piece, undeniable once it took hold. Daniel frowned, a faint crease forming between his brows. He knew that face. He knew that voice. The woman from the road, the stalled car, the quiet gratitude in her eyes. His chest tightened as understanding settled in, slow and heavy. He straightened instinctively, as if posture could change fate. Laura felt the weight of the room return all at once. Eyes watched her. Pens hovered. This was not the place for surprise, not the place for memory. She lowered her gaze to the file in front of her, grounding herself in paper and ink. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice steady again. "Please, step forward." He did boots scuffing softly against the floor. He did not speak until prompted. When he did, his voice was calm but tight, like a rope pulled too far. She listened. She listened harder than she ever had. She asked questions she had asked 100 times before, but now she heard the answers differently. Night shifts taken because they paid more. Missed meetings because there was no one else to watch Emily. Repairs done off the books because official jobs wanted younger backs and cheaper labor. The social worker spoke next, her tone careful, her words precise. Risk factors, patterns, recommendations. Laura nodded, as if this were any other case. Inside, something sharp twisted. She looked at Daniel again. "You understand the court's concern," she said. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied. She paused. The room held its breath with her. She thought of his truck idling behind her car in the rain, of how he had stayed until she was safe. She thought of Emily at the kitchen table, though she had never met her. The law demanded distance. It demanded blindness to anything not in the record. Laura closed the file slowly. "This court is not blind to effort," she said, "but effort must be supported by action." Daniel's jaw clenched. He waited. "I am ordering continued custody," she went on with mandatory oversight. "You will enroll in the county support program immediately. Weekly check-ins. Proof of employment within 90 days. Any failure will be reviewed without leniency." A murmur rippled through the room. The social worker glanced up, surprised. Daniel's breath left him in a rush he could not hide. Relief hit him so hard, his knees nearly gave out. "Thank you," he said, the words breaking despite his effort. Laura nodded once. "This is not mercy," she said quietly. "It is responsibility. Do not waste it." The gavel fell. The sound echoed longer than usual. After the room emptied, Laura sat alone for a moment, hands resting on the bench. She felt exposed in a way she had not in years. She had followed the law. She had not crossed a line. And yet she knew something had shifted. In the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, head bowed, breathing through the aftershock. The social worker passed him, pausing just long enough to say, "Don't make me regret this before moving on." He nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the air was crisp, the storm long gone. Daniel stepped into the light and pulled out his phone. He typed a message to his supervisor. "I can work nights and weekends. I won't miss shifts again." A moment passed. Then the reply came. "We'll talk." It wasn't a promise. It was something. Across town, Laura drove home under clear skies, the road dry and forgiving. She kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward. The image of Daniel standing in her courtroom replayed again and again. Not as a defendant, as a man standing at the edge of something he could not afford to lose. The road stretched ahead, quiet and unassuming. She knew with a certainty that unsettled her that this was not the last time their paths would cross. The first letter arrived on a Thursday, folded once, stamped with the county seal, and slid halfway under Daniel Parker's front door, like a quiet warning. He did not open it right away. He stood there with his jacket still on keys in his hand, listening to the house breathe. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked too loud. From the back room, Emily's music played softly, a song he didn't recognize but somehow understood. He opened the letter at the kitchen table. Program intake, mandatory orientation, Monday morning, attendance required, failure to appear would be noted. He let the paper rest flat and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. Monday mornings were for work. Monday mornings paid rent. Emily leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him the way she had learned to do when words felt dangerous. "Bad news?" "Not bad," he said. "Just more steps." She nodded slowly. "You always have more steps." He smiled at that, tired but real. Yeah, I guess I do. The orientation was held in a low brick building behind the county offices, the kind of place people passed every day without noticing. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. Plastic chairs were lined in uneven rows. Daniel sat near the back, hands folded, listening to a case manager explain resources in a voice worn thin by repetition. Job placement, parenting workshops, transportation vouchers. It all sounded useful. It all sounded fragile. During a break, a man across the room leaned over. "You here because you messed up?" he asked, not unkindly. "Or because someone decided you might?" Daniel considered the question. "Both," he said. The man nodded, satisfied. "Yeah, that tracks." Across town, Laura Whitmore stood at her office window watching clouds gather low over the city. The file on Daniel Parker sat closed on her desk, but she did not need to open it to see the contents. She had memorized the facts. What unsettled her was not the decision she had made. It was how clearly she could picture the consequences if he failed. She reached for her phone, then stopped. Judges did not call defendants. Judges did not check in. Boundaries existed for a reason. She set the phone back down and turned away from the window, telling herself that concern was not interference. That afternoon, Daniel received another call from his supervisor. The conversation was brief, clipped, and ended with a schedule that left no room to breathe. Night shifts, weekend hours, fewer guarantees. He said yes anyway. The weeks blurred together. Daniel slept in fragments, his days stitched from obligation. He attended check-ins, signed forms, answered questions that made his life sound smaller than it felt. He learned which buses ran late and which ones never came. He learned which managers respected effort and which only counted mistakes. Emily adapted with a quiet resilience that both broke and strengthened him. She packed her own lunches. She did her homework at the kitchen table without being asked. When he came home near dawn, she would sometimes be there asleep, with her head on her arms, pencil still in her hand. One night, as he eased the pencil from her fingers, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Daniel Parker?" He stared at it, then typed back. "Yes. This is Laura Whitmore." He sat down hard in the chair, pulse spiking. His first thought was panic. His second was anger. His third was a strange, unwelcome relief. "I want to be clear," the next message read. "This is not about your case. I am reaching out as a private citizen." He exhaled slowly and typed. "Then I'm listening." They met a week later at a diner on the edge of town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been there since morning. Laura arrived early and chose a corner seat. She wore no robe, no badge of authority. Just a coat and a scarf, her hair loose around her shoulders. Daniel slid into the booth across from her. Posture. "Careful." "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know." Silence stretched between them, filled by the clink of dishes and the murmur of other lives passing close by. "I didn't help you because of the case," she said, finally. "I helped because you needed it." He held her gaze. "I know." "And I didn't rule the way I did because of the road," she continued. "I ruled because the law allowed it." "I know that, too." She let out a breath she had been holding. "Good," They spoke carefully, skirting the edges of what could not be said. She asked about Emily. He answered with guarded pride. He asked about her work. She spoke of it in general terms, the weight of decisions, the cost of certainty. "I won't interfere," she said. "But I won't pretend I don't care." Daniel nodded once. "That's more than most people offer." Outside, the sky darkened. The first drops of rain tapped against the window, gentle at first, then insistent. The diner door opened, and a man in a tailored coat stepped inside, shaking water from his umbrella. He scanned the room, eyes sharp, then froze when he saw Laura. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by calculation. He approached the table without asking. "Laura," he said, smooth as glass. "I didn't expect to see you here." She stiffened. "Richard." Daniel looked between them, senses sharpening. "Friend of yours?" Richard smiled thinly. "Colleague. Former." He glanced at Daniel, eyes assessing. "And you must be one of the cases." Laura's jaw tightened. "This conversation is over." Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Careful," he said. "Appearances matter, especially now." He straightened and walked away, leaving behind a trail of unease thicker than the rain. Daniel watched him go. That looked personal. Laura did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady but cold. "Some people believe the law is a weapon," she said. "Others believe it is a shield." "Which one are you?" Daniel asked. She met his eyes. "That depends on who is standing in front of me." They left the diner separately, the rain falling harder now, turning the streetlights into halos. Daniel drove home with his hands tight on the wheel, thoughts racing. He had walked into that meeting as a man under scrutiny. He left it with the uneasy sense that he had stepped into something larger. At home, Emily waited up, curled on the couch with a blanket. "You're late," she said. "I know," he replied, kneeling in front of her. "But I'm still here." She studied his face, then nodded. "Okay." Later. As the house settled into sleep, Daniel sat at the table and stared at his phone. A new message waited. Unknown number again. "Be careful," it read. "Some storms don't show on the radar." He did not know who had sent it. He only knew that the rain outside had begun to fall harder, and that whatever was coming would not be as simple as missing a check-in. The call came just after midnight, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Daniel was awake already, sitting at the kitchen table with unpaid bills spread out in uneven stacks when his phone vibrated against the wood. No name, no warning, just a number he did not recognize. He answered without speaking. "They're moving faster than they should," a man's voice said. Low, controlled, not asking permission to be heard. "The review board flagged your file this afternoon." Daniel closed his eyes. "Who is this?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing the wrong people crushed," the voice replied. "And someone who knows exactly how this works." Daniel stood and walked to the window, keeping his voice down. Outside, rain streaked the glass, the street empty and slick under the streetlight. "If you know how this works, then you know you shouldn't be calling me." A pause. "You shouldn't be alone in this." The line went dead. Daniel stayed where he was, phone pressed to his ear long after the call ended. His pulse thudded slow and heavy. He knew that voice. Not the name. Not the face. But the tone. It was the tone of someone used to rooms going quiet when he spoke. In another part of town, Laura Whitmore sat at her desk, jacket still on files, stacked higher than usual. She had cancelled dinner, cancelled sleep. The courthouse was nearly empty, but her office light still burned. On her screen, an internal memo glowed in stark black text. Case review expedited due to administrative concerns. Oversight recommended. Temporary removal pending evaluation. Her fingers tightened on the mouse. This was not procedure. This was pressure. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. It rang twice. "You're late," Richard's voice said when he answered. "You pushed a file that wasn't yours," Laura replied. "You used channels you don't control." A soft laugh. "You always did hate the messy parts. This stops now." Or, what he asked calmly, "You'll scold me. File a complaint. Be careful, Laura. You're not untouchable." The line went silent before she could respond. She set the phone down slowly, jaw tight, mind racing. This was no longer about one case. This was about leverage. The next morning, Daniel dropped Emily off at school under a sky heavy with clouds. She lingered longer than usual, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes searching his face. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Always." She didn't look convinced. "They're not taking me right." His chest tightened. "No," he said firmly. "No one's taking you." She hugged him hard, then turned and walked away without looking back. At work, Daniel barely had time to clock in before his supervisor pulled him aside. "I need you to stay flexible," the man said, eyes darting around the shop. "Things are shifting." Daniel wiped grease from his hands. "That usually means bad news." The supervisor lowered his voice. "Just don't miss any calls. From anyone." By noon, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it was the case manager. "Review hearing scheduled. Tomorrow morning. Attendance mandatory. Failure to appear will result in immediate action." He stared at the screen until the words blurred. Across town, Laura stood in a small conference room with 2 senior administrators and a stack of files that did not belong together. They spoke in careful phrases. Oversight, optics, community standards. None of them met her eyes for long. "This is unusual," she said flatly. "That doesn't mean it's wrong," one of them replied. She closed the folder with a sharp snap. "It means someone wants a result." No one argued. That evening, Daniel came home to find a black sedan parked across the street. The engine was off, the windows dark. He slowed, every instinct on edge. As he stepped onto his porch, the driver's door opened. A man in his late 60s got out, tall, silver-haired, wearing a coat that cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. He smiled as if they were old friends. "Daniel Parker," the man said. "You don't know me, but I know you." Daniel did not move. "You're on my property." The man nodded. "Fair. I'll be brief." He glanced at the house. "Your daughter's inside." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Say what you came to say." The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This situation you're in," he said, "it's not about parenting. It's about precedent. And precedent scares people." Daniel studied him, something cold settling in his stomach. "You don't sound like someone from social services." A faint smile. "I'm not. And why are you here?" "Because someone underestimated you," the man replied, "and because that mistake is about to cost them." Daniel let out a humorless breath. "You've got the wrong guy." The man shook his head slowly. "No, we have exactly the right one." He slipped a card into Daniel's hand. "No title, just a name and a number. Tomorrow will get ugly. Don't go in blind." He turned and walked back to the sedan, leaving Daniel standing there with rain starting to fall again, card heavy in his palm. Inside, Emily watched from the hallway. Who was that? Daniel forced his shoulders to relax. "Nobody," he said. "Just a wrong address." That night, Laura reviewed the law until her eyes burned. She traced statutes, reread case law, mapped procedure like a battlefield. She was not afraid of being challenged. She was afraid of being outmaneuvered. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "They're trying to make an example. Be ready." She typed back. "Of who?" The reply came a moment later. "Of anyone who forgets their place." Morning broke sharp and cold. The courtroom filled faster than usual, tension humming beneath polite murmurs. Daniel sat at the table, spine straight, hands steady, despite the storm raging in his chest. Laura took her seat and scanned the room, noting unfamiliar faces along the back wall. Observers, interested parties. The clerk called the case. Daniel stood. Laura met his eyes briefly, something unspoken passing between them. Before proceedings could begin, a man rose from the gallery. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "I represent a concerned third party." Laura's expression did not change. "Sit down," she said. "You'll speak when recognized." The man smiled and sat unbothered. As testimony unfolded, Laura felt the shape of the trap closing. Questions that cut too close. Timelines accelerated without justification. It was all technically permissible. That was the danger. Then Daniel spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not plead. He spoke clearly, deliberately, answering what was asked, and nothing more. But as he did, something shifted. The way the room listened. The way certain people stiffened. Laura felt it then. Not recognition. Something deeper. This man was not reacting like someone cornered. He was measuring. When the hearing adjourned for recess, Laura stood and announced a delay. "This court requires additional review," she said. "Proceedings will resume after lunch." The gavel fell. Conversations erupted. In the hallway, Daniel's phone buzzed. A single message. "Now." He stepped into an empty side room and dialed the number on the card. It rang once. "It's time," the voice said. "They think you're still small." Daniel closed his eyes, a long breath leaving him. "Let them," he replied. "For now." Outside the courthouse, the rain began again, slow at first, then harder, drumming against stone and glass. Inside, Laura. Whitmore stood alone in her chambers, staring at the file in her hands. realizing with growing certainty that the man everyone saw as powerless was anything but. The courtroom felt smaller after lunch, as if the walls had leaned in while everyone was gone. Daniel returned to his seat with the same measured steps. But something in his posture had changed. His shoulders were still. His breathing slow, his eyes alert in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Laura noticed it immediately. So did the man in the gallery who had spoken out of turn earlier. He sat back now, hands folded, watching Daniel like a calculation in progress. The clerk called the room to order. Laura took the bench and let the murmurs die on their own. She did not rush. She had learned long ago that silence could be a tool sharper than any objection. "We will proceed," she said. The attorney for the concerned third party stood again, smooth and confident. He framed his words carefully, citing timelines, citing policy painting urgency as responsibility. He spoke of standards and risk and the court's duty to act decisively. He never once looked at Daniel when he spoke about him. Daniel listened without moving. When the attorney finished, Laura turned her gaze to him. "Mr. Parker," she said, "do you have anything to add?" Daniel rose. The room expected a defense, an explanation, an apology. What they got was none of those. "Yes," he said, "I do." He did not look at Laura. He looked past her toward the gallery, toward the unfamiliar faces that had come to observe. "There's been a lot said about who I am based on paperwork," he continued, "about what I make when I work where I live. I've answered those questions. I'll answer them again if asked. But before we go any further, I need to clarify something." A ripple moved through the room. "I didn't ask for special treatment," Daniel said. "I asked for time. Time to prove what my daughter already knows." The attorney smirked faintly. "Your Honor," he interjected, "this is irrelevant." Laura raised a hand. "He will finish." Daniel nodded in thanks and went on. "There seems to be an assumption that I don't understand how this process works," he said. "That I don't recognize when procedures are being bent or accelerated, or when attention is being paid for reasons that have nothing to do with a child's well-being." The smirk vanished. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. He did not brandish it. He held it like any other object, unremarkable. "I've received communications," he said, "from individuals who are not part of my case. Individuals with knowledge of internal timelines and review mechanisms that are not public." Laura's pulse ticked up. She kept her face neutral. "I was advised to prepare for today," Daniel continued. "I was advised that this hearing was not routine." The attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. If Mr. Parker is alleging misconduct, he needs to do so through proper channels." Laura leaned forward slightly. "Sit down," she said. "You've had the floor." Daniel met her eyes now. There was no plea there, only certainty. "I am not alleging anything," he said. "I am stating what happened." He turned his phone so the screen faced the bench. "These messages were sent to me before the hearing was scheduled. The timestamps are clear." Laura did not reach for the phone. She did not need to. "Who sent them?" she asked. Daniel paused. Someone who believed this court was being tested. A murmur rose, and Laura brought the gavel down once. The sound cracked through the room. "Enough." She sat back, mind moving fast. This was the line. Once crossed, there was no return. "The court will take a brief recess," she said. "All parties will remain available." She stood and left the bench without another word. In her chambers, Laura closed the door and leaned against it, breath shallow. The file lay on her desk, suddenly heavier than paper should be. She thought of the memo, the phone call, Richard's warning, the observers in the back row. She crossed the room and picked up the phone. This time she did not hesitate. She dialed a number that did not appear on any courthouse directory. "I need you," she said when the line connected. "Now." Back in the courtroom, Daniel remained standing until the clerk gestured for him to sit. He did. The attorney whispered urgently into his phone. The man in the gallery watched Daniel with open interest, now his expression no longer bored. Daniel's phone vibrated once more. A single message appeared. "Good, keep going." He did not reply. Minutes stretched. The room buzzed with speculation. When Laura returned, she was not alone. 2 uniformed court officers followed her in faces unreadable. Behind them came a woman in a dark suit, carrying a folder thick with documents. Laura took the bench and surveyed the room. Her voice, when she spoke, carried farther than before. "This court has received information that necessitates an immediate procedural review." The attorney stood. "Your Honor, with respect, this is highly irregular." "So is what prompted it," Laura replied. She nodded to the woman standing near the clerk. "Please state your name." "Angela Ruiz," the woman said. "Judicial oversight." The words landed like a dropped plate. Angela Ruiz continued. "We have reason to believe that attempts were made to influence the handling of this case outside of proper channels." The attorney's face drained of color. Laura's gaze locked on him. "Do you still wish to proceed?" she asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He sat. The man in the gallery stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, his earlier confidence gone, "this is unnecessary." Laura's eyes were cold. "Sit down," she said. "You are not recognized." Angela Ruiz stepped forward and placed the folder on the bench. "This court will suspend further action pending a full review," she said, "effective immediately." A collective exhale rippled through the room. Daniel felt it hit him like a wave. He remained still, heart pounding, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Laura looked at him, then truly looked. She saw not a defendant, not a symbol, but a man who had chosen patience when panic would have been easier. A man who had been underestimated by design. "Mr. Parker," she said, "you are to continue under the existing order. No additional actions will be taken until this review is complete." "Yes, Your Honor," he replied. The gavel fell. This time it sounded final. In the hallway, chaos reigned. Phones rang. Voices rose and fell. Daniel moved through it like a current, focused, controlled. The man from the gallery brushed past him, shoulder grazing his arm. "This isn't over," the man hissed. Daniel stopped. He turned slowly, meeting the man's eyes. "No," he said. "It is." The man faltered something like recognition, flickering there before he turned away. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight broke through clouds, sharp and bright. Daniel stood on the courthouse steps, breathing it in. His phone buzzed again. A new message. "You did exactly what you needed to do." he typed back. "Who are you?" The reply came almost immediately. "Someone who knows what you built before you lost everything." Daniel's fingers stilled. A memory surfaced, long buried. Boardrooms, contracts, a name he had not used in years. Across the street, Laura watched him from her office window. She felt the ground shifting beneath old assumptions. The man she had believed she was protecting had never been powerless. He had been quiet. And quiet, she now understood, could be dangerous. Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after the house went quiet, the faint glow of his phone lighting his hands as memory crept back in pieces he had spent years keeping buried. Not the courthouse, not the threats. Older than that. Glass offices, long tables, voices that paused when he entered a room. A different name spoken with respect, sometimes fear. He closed his eyes, jaw tight, and forced himself back to the present. Emily needed breakfast, not ghosts. Morning came pale and cold. Emily shuffled into the kitchen, hair tied back, eyes half open. She stopped when she saw him still there. "You didn't go to bed," she said. "I'm fine," he replied. "Sit. Eat." She poured cereal, watching him over the rim of the bowl. "Something happened yesterday," she said. It was not a question. He considered lying. He always did. Then he shook his head. "Yeah. Something happened." "Bad?" she asked. "Complicated," he said. "But not bad." She nodded slowly, absorbing that the way only a teenager could. "Okay." Across town, Laura Whitmore arrived at the courthouse earlier than she ever had. The building felt different now, quieter. Not empty, but alert, like it knew something had shifted. Her office door was already unlocked. On her desk waited a sealed envelope marked confidential. No return address. Inside was a single page. No letterhead. Just a list of dates, names, and internal references she recognized immediately. Her breath caught. This was not rumor. This was architecture. Influence mapped with precision. Her phone rang. She did not look at the caller ID before answering. "Yes. You handled yesterday well," the voice said. "Not Richard. Older. Colder. But you've stepped into something larger than a custody case." Laura straightened. "So has everyone else," she replied. A pause. "Then be careful who you assume is vulnerable." The line went dead. Daniel dropped Emily at school and waited until she was inside before driving away. He did not go to work. He did not go home. He drove until the roads narrowed and the town thinned until he reached a small industrial park on the edge of the county. He parked behind a shuttered building and sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing slow. The message from the night before replayed in his mind. Someone who knows what you built before you lost everything. He stepped out of the truck and walked to the side door. It opened before he knocked. The man inside was tall, spare-dressed, simply, but expensively. Late 60s. Steel in his eyes. He smiled without warmth. "You took your time," he said. Daniel studied him. "You're the voice." The man nodded. "I used to work for you." A memory clicked into place. Daniel's throat tightened. "I didn't think anyone from that life was still paying attention." "We never stopped," the man replied. "You disappeared. The system assumed you were finished. Some of us knew better. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. Why now? Because they crossed a line, the man said. They assumed you were small enough to crush quietly. That was a mistake. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. I don't want to burn anything down, he said. I just want my daughter left alone. The man's expression softened just slightly. Then you should have never been forced to remember who you are. Back at the courthouse, Laura convened a private meeting with Angela Ruiz and 2 senior judges from neighboring counties. The room was sealed, phones off. What Laura laid out was not emotional. It was meticulous. Timelines, deviations, pressure points. Names spoken carefully, each one heavier than the last. This isn't a rogue attorney, Angela said quietly. This is coordinated. Laura nodded. And Daniel Parker is not the intended target. They all understood what that meant. He was leverage, or bait. That afternoon, Daniel returned to the shop to collect his tools. His supervisor met him at the door, eyes uneasy. You're on leave, the man said. Paid. Don't ask how. Daniel didn't. He nodded and left. On his phone, another message waited. They're watching, but they don't know what you know yet. Daniel typed back slowly. Neither do you. The reply took longer this time. Fair. That evening, Emily sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone when Daniel came in. She looked up, reading his face. You're home early. Yeah, he said. Thought we'd order pizza. She smiled, relieved, then hesitated. Dad? Yeah. You used to be different, she said carefully. Before Mum got sick. Before everything. He sat beside her. Different how? Quieter now, she said. Like you're always holding something back. He considered that. Then he nodded. I was trying to protect you. From what? He met her eyes. From who I used to be. She thought about that, then leaned against his shoulder. I don't need protecting from you. The words hit harder than any threat. Late that night, Laura drove home under clear skies, her mind still racing. At a red light, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He's not who you think. He never was. She stared at the screen. Then she typed. Neither are you. The reply came almost instantly. Correct. At home, Daniel stood in the dark, looking out at the quiet street. The rain was gone. The air felt charged, waiting. He knew now that silence was no longer an option. He had tried to live small. The world had refused to let him. His phone vibrated one last time. Tomorrow, the real questions start. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket and turned off the light. Somewhere beyond the dark forces were aligning old names, stirring doors unlocking that had been sealed for years. He did not know how far this would go. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had mistaken his restraint for weakness. The first subpoena landed before sunrise, slid under Laura Whitmore's office door by a clerk who did not knock. It was thin, surgical. It named banks, shell entities, advisory committees that were supposed to exist only on paper. Laura read it twice, then a third time, feeling the shape of the trap widen. This was no longer pressure applied in shadows. This was daylight. Across town, Daniel Parker stood at his kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug he hadn't touched. His phone buzzed once, then again. Unknown number. He didn't answer. He watched the water spiral down the drain, steady, obedient, and thought about how systems liked order, how they punished friction. Emily appeared in the doorway, backpack slung, eyes sharp. "They're talking about you at school," she said. He turned slowly. "Who is they?" "Parents," she said. "One of them works downtown." She said your name like it was a warning. Daniel dried his hands on a towel. "Did you hear anything else?" Emily shrugged. "Just that people with money don't like being embarrassed." He knelt to her height. "Listen to me," he said. "No matter what you hear, no matter what anyone says, you come straight home after school. Call me if anything feels off." She searched his face. "Are we in trouble?" He smiled, small but real. "We're in a story people didn't expect." She nodded, accepting that answer the way she always did when the truth came wrapped in something careful. She left. Daniel watched from the window until she disappeared around the corner. At the courthouse, Laura convened another closed meeting. This one felt different, tighter. The people in the room were not all allies. Some watched her with interest, some with calculation. She spoke anyway. "What's happening now," she said, "will either correct a breach or normalize it. There's no middle ground." A judge across the table leaned back. "You're asking us to pick a side." "I'm asking you to remember your oath," Laura replied. The judge smiled thinly. "Oaths don't keep careers intact." Laura held his gaze. Neither does silence. By mid-morning, the press had arrived. Not in a rush, not loud, just enough cameras to signal intention. Daniel saw them from across the street when he drove Emily's old route out of habit. He turned away and parked behind a warehouse instead, phone already vibrating with messages he did not read. A new number texted. "They're moving assets," Daniel typed back. "Which ones?" A pause. "Then all the ones that matter." He closed his eyes, the old map unfolding in his mind. Layers, cutouts, boards that answered to no one. He had built it once to survive a market that rewarded speed over conscience. He had walked away when it ate the wrong people. He had thought distance would be enough. It wasn't. He drove to the industrial park again. The side door opened before he reached it. The man from before stood there, expression grim. "They're panicking," the man said. "That makes them sloppy." Daniel stepped inside. "Sloppy gets people hurt. Only if you hesitate." Daniel stopped and faced him. "This ends clean." The man studied him. "You always did insist on that." Back at the courthouse, Laura received confirmation she had not asked for. A temporary restraining order against interference had been filed, quietly, from a federal office that did not move without reason. She exhaled slowly, the first breath she had taken all morning. Her phone rang, a private number. She answered. "They think you're grandstanding," the voice said. "Familiar now." "Controlled." "They're wrong." "I don't need approval," Laura replied. "You need timing," the voice said. And you need to understand who you're standing next to. Laura's grip tightened. I know exactly who I'm standing next to. Do you? The voice asked. Or do you know who he let you see? The line went dead. Daniel picked Emily up himself that afternoon. He parked where she could see him, made sure his face was visible, unbothered. She climbed into the truck and shut the door hard. Someone followed me, she said. His chest went cold. Who? I don't know, she said. A car, black, didn't stop, just stayed there. He nodded once. Okay. Okay, she echoed. That's it. That's it, he said. Because now we change routines. He drove a different way home. 2 turns longer. 1 street narrower. The black car did not appear. That night, Laura stood in her kitchen jacket, still on, listening to the house creak. She poured a glass of water she did not drink. Her phone buzzed with a single message. Tomorrow morning. Be ready. She replied. I am. Daniel sat at the table with a legal pad and wrote names. Not all of them. Just enough. He crossed some out, circled others. He folded the page and slid it into an envelope he addressed by hand. Emily watched from the couch. You're doing the thing again, she said. What thing? The quiet, she said. The one you do before everything changes. He looked at her, then held out the envelope. If anything happens to me, he said carefully, you give this to the woman I showed you at the courthouse. Her eyes widened. Dad? He softened his voice. It's just planning. She took the envelope with both hands. I don't like planning. I know, he said. Me neither. Morning came sharp and clear. The courthouse steps filled with people who pretended they were there for other reasons. Inside, Laura took her seat, the room buzzing with anticipation. Daniel entered through a side door, unnoticed by most, watched by a few. The clerk called the session. Laura did not waste time. This court recognizes the presence of federal observers, she said. Proceedings will reflect that reality. A murmur rippled. Daniel felt the air shift. From the gallery, the man in the tailored coat stood. Your Honor, he said, voice smooth. We object to. Laura raised her hand. You may object later, she said. Right now you may listen. She gestured to the bailiff, who handed her a folder thick with paper. This court has been presented with evidence of coordinated interference, Laura continued. It will be entered into the record. The man sat slowly, face unreadable. Daniel stood when called. This time, he did not wait to be asked. I have nothing further to say about my parenting, he said, but I do have something to say about power. Laura watched him closely. So did everyone else. I spent years believing that if I kept my head down, the machine would move on, Daniel said. It doesn't. It looks for leverage. It looks for people it thinks won't fight back. He met Laura's eyes. I'm done being leverage. Silence pressed down heavy and absolute. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, lines were being crossed that could not be uncrossed. Laura felt it then, clear as a bell. This was the moment. Not the verdict. Not the fallout. The moment when restraint became choice, and choice became consequence. The gavel had not fallen yet. But everyone in the room knew it was coming. The silence after Daniel's words did not break on its own. It had to be cut. Laura felt the weight of it press against her ribs as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting to see who would flinch first. She did not. She leaned forward slightly, eyes steady, and spoke with a calm that carried authority like a blade carried balance. "The court will hear evidence," she said, "not speeches. Mr. Parker, you will confine your statements to facts." Daniel nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." From the gallery, a low chuckle slipped out before it could be stopped. It came from the man in the tailored coat. He rose slowly, palms open, the picture of polite resistance. With respect, he said, "This is becoming theatrical." Laura did not look at him. "Sit down." He hesitated. That hesitation cost him. The bailiff stepped closer. The man sat. Laura turned back to Daniel. "Proceed." Daniel took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more deliberate. "3 weeks ago, he said my case was scheduled for routine review. 2 days later, internal timelines changed without explanation. Observers appeared. A third party filed motions without standing. I was contacted by individuals with access to non-public information. He lifted his phone not to show it, but to anchor his words in something tangible. I retained those messages. I retained call logs. I did not respond publicly. I waited. The attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. This is speculative." Laura's eyes snapped to him. "Overruled." "Sit down." Daniel continued. "I also reviewed my own records," he said. "Records from before my name became inconvenient." A stir rippled through the room. Laura felt it. A pressure shift. She kept her face still. "Your Honor." Daniel said, "I request permission to submit documents under seal." Laura paused for the briefest moment. Then she nodded. "Granted." The bailiff approached. Daniel handed over a thin envelope. It did not look impressive. That was the point. As the clerk accepted it, the man in the tailored coat leaned forward, his voice sharp now. "This is a custody matter," he said, "not a forum for conspiracy." Laura finally looked at him. Her gaze was cold. "You will not address this court again unless recognized." He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. The clerk passed the envelope to Laura. She opened it slowly, reading as the room waited. The first page made her inhale through her nose. The second made her sit back. By the third, she understood the shape of what Daniel had done. He had not accused. He had contextualized. Shell boards tied to advisory committees tied to policy recommendations tied to family court funding. Names that appeared nowhere near a custody docket, yet hovered over it like weather. Laura closed the envelope and set it aside. "This material will be reviewed," she said evenly. "In the meantime, this court will hear from judicial oversight." Angela Ruiz stood. She did not look at Daniel. She looked at the room. "An independent inquiry has been initiated," she said. "Certain communications and financial movements raise concerns about undue influence." The attorney opened his mouth. Laura cut him off. "You may confer with your client," she said, quietly. Daniel remained standing, hands at his sides, eyes forward. Laura studied him now with new clarity. This was not improvisation. This was patience. From the back of the room, a new presence made itself known. A man Laura had never seen before stood, flashing a badge, just long enough to be recognized. Federal. Not announced, not ceremonial. "Your Honor," he said, "we request a short recess to coordinate." Laura nodded once. 10 minutes. The gavel fell. This time the sound fractured the room. In the hallway, voices collided. Phones came out. The man in the tailored coat moved fast, whispering into his device, eyes darting. Daniel stepped aside, leaning against the wall, invisible again by choice. Laura retreated to her chambers with Angela Ruiz and the Federal Observer. The door closed. The lock clicked. "They underestimated him," Angela said. Laura nodded. "They assumed fear." The Federal Observer folded his hands. "We assumed he'd fold." Laura met his eyes. "You assumed wrong." Daniel checked his phone. No messages. That silence told him more than words. He watched the hallway reflect panic like a mirror. He had spent years learning what panic looked like on men who thought they controlled rooms. The man from the industrial park appeared at the far end, not approaching, just nodding once. Confirmation. Daniel's thoughts flicked to Emily, to the envelope she held at home, to the promise he had not spoken aloud. When the doors reopened, the courtroom felt different. Sharper, as if something had been peeled back. Laura took the bench. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a finality that made the press in the back lean forward. "This court will suspend all actions related to custody pending the outcome of the independent inquiry," she said. "Mr. Parker will retain custody without additional conditions." The attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is an overreach." Laura's eyes did not leave him. "You are free to appeal." The man in the tailored coat stood abruptly. "This is a mistake." Laura looked at him then, truly looked. "No," she said. "This is exposure." Daniel exhaled, slow and controlled. He did not smile. This was not a victory. It was a breach. As proceedings adjourned, Laura added Mr. Parker remain. The room emptied in a rush of whispers and flashing screens. When the doors closed, only a few remained. Laura descended from the bench and stood in front of Daniel. The distance between judge and citizen collapsed into a few feet. "You planned this?" she said quietly. "I prepared," he replied. She studied his face. "You knew they'd push." "Yes." "And you let them." "Yes." "Why?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Because if I stopped them early, they'd find another way. Another family. Another name." Laura nodded slowly. "You're not just defending yourself?" "No," he said. "I'm ending something." Outside, the sky had darkened again, clouds rolling in with purpose. Daniel stepped onto the courthouse steps, cameras flashing. Now questions shouted. He did not answer. He got into his truck and drove away before the storm could break. At home, Emily sat at the table with the envelope untouched. She looked up when he came in. "Did it work?" "For now," he said. She studied him. "You're not done." He shook his head. "No." That night, Laura stood at her window, watching rain streak the glass once more. Her phone buzzed. A final message from an unknown number. "They're backing off." but they're afraid now. She typed back. Of him. The reply came after a pause. Of what he represents. Laura set the phone down, heart steady, mind clear. Somewhere in the city, forces were recalibrating, retreating, reshaping. And somewhere else, a man everyone had underestimated was deciding how much truth to let the world see. The storm broke hard, loud, unavoidable. The city woke to headlines that pretended nothing had happened. Daniel noticed it on the television mounted above the counter at the diner, where he stopped for coffee, the anchor's voice smooth, careful, saying a lot without saying anything at all. An internal review. Procedural questions. No names. No context. The machine protecting itself with silence. He paid and left before the cup cooled the bell above the door, ringing once behind him. Outside, the air felt charged, as if the storm had scrubbed something raw and exposed. His phone buzzed in his pocket. This time it was not a warning. It was an invitation. Private meeting, noon, downtown. He did not need to ask where. He knew. Laura Whitmore arrived at the courthouse later than usual and found a man waiting outside her chambers who did not belong to her world. He wore no badge, no suit, just a plain coat and a posture that suggested patience as a discipline. "You're persistent," she said. He smiled faintly. "You're effective." They walked together, not speaking until they reached a conference room with no windows. Inside a screen waited dark cables, coiled neatly on the table. Laura closed the door herself. "You understand the risk," she said. The man nodded. "We understand the necessity." At noon, Daniel parked 2 blocks away from the building and walked the rest, head down, steps even. People passed him without a second glance. That anonymity had once been his shield. Today it felt like a weapon. The room he entered was spare. No insignia, no decor. A long table. 3 chairs occupied. 1 empty. The man from the industrial park sat at one end. Another man Daniel did not recognize sat at the other, older, eyes sharp, hands folded as if at prayer. Daniel took the middle seat. "You shouldn't be here," the older man said. Daniel met his gaze. "Neither should you." A flicker of approval crossed the man's face. "You still remember how to negotiate. I remember how to listen," Daniel replied. The man leaned back. "Good. Then listen carefully. What happened in that courtroom rattled people. Not because of the case, because of the exposure. You disrupted a pattern." Daniel nodded. "Patterns hurt people. Patterns keep systems running." The man countered. "At what cost?" Daniel asked. Silence stretched. The man from the industrial park spoke. "We can end this cleanly," he said. "You walk away. Custody secured. Employment restored. Your name disappears again." Daniel considered. The offer felt its weight. "And the next family?" he asked. "The next leaver?" The older man's jaw tightened. "You were never sentimental." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I was always precise." Across town, Laura sat in the conference room as the screen came to life. Names appeared. Transactions. Lines connecting entities that had no business knowing one another. Her breath slowed as she took it in. This was not theory. This was proof. "They're already containing it," the man beside her said. "You won't see arrests today." Laura nodded. "I don't need arrests." "What do you need?" Light, she said. Back in the private room, the older man steepled his fingers. You want to burn the house down, he said. Daniel shook his head. I want to open the doors. You always did choose the hardest option. Daniel's mouth twitched. That's not a compliment. The man smiled despite himself. It is from me. They sat there, 3 men, circling a truth that had been avoided for years. Daniel felt the old instincts settle into place, the part of him that had once commanded rooms, not with volume, but with inevitability. I'm not here to negotiate my silence, Daniel said. I'm here to negotiate yours. The man laughed once, sharp. You don't have that leverage. Daniel reached into his jacket and placed a slim drive on the table. That's where you're wrong. The man from the industrial park stiffened. You said you wouldn't. Daniel did not look at him. I said I wouldn't, unless they forced my hand. The older man stared at the drive as if it might bite him. What is that? A map, Daniel said. One you thought only a few people ever saw. Across the city, Laura watched the feed shift as another file loaded. Her heart thudded once hard. This went deeper than she had imagined. She thought of Daniel standing alone at the center of it, refusing to bend. Her phone buzzed. A single word from an unknown number. Now. Daniel stood. You can take that, he said, nodding to the drive. Or you can watch it become public through channels you don't control. The older man did not move. Who do you think you are? He asked quietly. Daniel met his eyes. I'm the person who built the system you're hiding behind. The words landed with the force of a dropped plate. The man from the industrial park closed his eyes. The older man leaned back slowly, reassessing everything. Daniel Parker isn't your name, he said. No, Daniel replied. It's the one I needed. Silence again, thicker this time. Respect crept in uninvited. Laura stood as the final file finished uploading. This goes to oversight, she said, and to the press. The man beside her nodded. You'll make enemies. Laura smiled thinly. I already have. Daniel left the building without waiting for an answer. He did not need one. His phone buzzed as he stepped into the street. Emily's name lit the screen. You okay? She asked. He smiled, warmth cutting through the tension. I am. You sound different. I feel different. At home that evening, they ate together in quiet, the normalcy surreal. Emily watched him between bites. Are we safe? For tonight, he said. She nodded, accepting the truth as given. Across the city, phones rang in rooms that had never heard panic before. Doors closed. Meetings were cancelled. Strategies rewritten. Laura sat alone in her office long after dark, the city glowing beneath her window. She thought of the road in the rain, of a man kneeling beside a broken car with no expectation of reward, of how power revealed itself only when stripped of disguise. Daniel stood at his window, the quiet street below, unchanged, and allowed himself one long breath. He had not revealed everything. Not yet. But the line had been crossed. Tomorrow, the world would learn that the man they had tried to crush was not just resilient. He was foundational. Morning arrived without ceremony, the way truth often does after a long night. Daniel woke before the alarm, the house still, the air clean from rain. He stood at the kitchen window and watched light gather along the curb, watched the ordinary reclaim its place. For the first time in weeks, his chest felt unguarded. The phone did not ring. That, too, was information. Emily shuffled in hair still damp from the shower, backpack slung loose. She paused when she saw him standing there. "It's quiet," she said. "It won't last," he replied, not unkindly. "But it's ours for now." They ate breakfast together, slow and unhurried. When she left for school, she turned back at the door and hugged him hard. He held on a second longer than usual, feeling the steady beat that mattered more than any headline. Downtown, the city moved like it always had, except it didn't. People spoke in lower voices. Meetings started late. Names were avoided. A press release went out at 9, then another at 10, each one saying less than the last. An investigation was confirmed. Oversight expanded. A task force formed. The language was careful antiseptic, designed to slow the spread of accountability. Laura Whitmore read the statements from her office and closed the browser. She did not feel triumphant. She felt resolved. The cost of what she had done would arrive in increments, she knew that. Invitations would dry up. Allies would hesitate. But the line had been drawn with intention, and she had stood on the right side of it. She rose and walked the courthouse corridors one last time without interruption. People nodded. Some avoided her eyes. She accepted both. In chambers, she packed a single box, leaving the rest for staff. On her desk, a note waited in an unfamiliar hand. Clean work, necessary work. She folded it and placed it in her pocket. Across town, Daniel parked outside a modest office building that hadn't changed since the 90s. Inside, the man from the industrial park, weighted jacket draped over a chair posture less rigid than before. "It's done," the man said. Daniel shook his head. "It started." The man smiled, conceding the point. "They've agreed to terms." Daniel did not sit. "Not my concern." "Your name won't be used," the man offered. "Ever." Daniel met his eyes. "My daughter will." The man nodded slowly. "Understood." They parted without ceremony. No handshake, no photograph. Power did not need documentation when it corrected itself. By noon, the first real story broke. Not a splash, a leak. Documents cited. Patterns explained. A careful reporter did the work without drama. The machine had been forced to speak. Daniel watched none of it. He picked up Emily from school and drove the long way home, windows down the air, moving through the truck like a promise. At a stoplight, she reached for the radio and turned it off. "You don't need noise today," she said. He smiled. "You're right." At home, the afternoon stretched. He fixed a loose hinge. She worked on homework at the table. The normal returned in small acts. When the doorbell rang, he felt no spike of fear. He opened it. Laura stood on the porch, coat folded over her arm, hair pulled back, eyes clear. No robe, no distance. "I won't stay long," she said. "You don't have to," he replied, stepping aside. They sat at the table where everything had begun to feel fragile and ended up steady. She did not congratulate him. He did not thank her. They spoke of practical things, of school schedules, of weather patterns, of what it meant to hold a line when no one was watching. "They'll rewrite the rules," she said quietly. "They always do." "They can," he replied. "They just won't forget this time." She nodded. "Neither will I." Before she left, she looked at Emily and said, "Your father did something very hard." Emily considered that, then shrugged. "He always does?" Laura smiled, the kind that comes from relief earned, and stepped back into the light. That evening, Daniel stood at the sink, washing dishes, the radio low. The anchor's voice moved through the story without naming him. That was fine. He did not need the credit. He needed the outcome. Emily dried and stacked, humming off-key. The future did not feel fixed, but it felt possible. Night fell without drama. The street stayed quiet. Daniel turned off the lights and stood by the window one last time. He thought of the road in the rain, of hands, steady under pressure, of the choice to remain human when power tempted concealment. He thought of all the families who would never know how close they had come to being used, and all the people who would never know who had closed the door. He went to bed without checking his phone. In the days that followed, consequences arrived as expected. Resignations, audits, carefully worded apologies that never quite reached the heart of the harm. Daniel returned to work this time on his terms. Emily thrived, unburdened by the constant edge of uncertainty. Laura declined an offer that would have softened the blow and accepted another that would not. Life did not become simple. It became honest. On a clear morning, weeks later, Daniel drove past the courthouse and did not slow down. The building stood as it always had, stone and glass and memory. He kept going. The road opened. The light was good. The city receded. Somewhere behind him, the machine recalibrated, quieter now, less sure of itself. Somewhere ahead, Emily laughed at something small and true. Daniel held the wheel with both hands and drove. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that quiet courage still matters and that power can be answered without becoming it, take a moment to like and subscribe and leave a comment with 3 words: stand for justice.